Welcome to the Good Divorce Show, where we can help you learn how to navigate the journey of divorce with less conflict, less debt, and equip you not to just get divorced, but also learn how to be divorced. Your host, Certified Divorce Coach Karen McNenny, shares her wealth of knowledge, gets advice from other relationship experts, and interviews couples who learn how to have a good divorce, so you can too. Now here's your host, Karen.
Hello, listeners. Thank you so much, not just for joining me, but to yourselves, for giving yourself the opportunity to consider how you can have a good divorce. And if you're already on the other side, remember, it's never too late to have a good divorce. And that's one of the things that we are really trying to support you with here on the Good Divorce Show. And thank you all for showing up each and every episode, bringing not only experts and their lens and the way that they can help you navigate the logistics, but remember, we also have a lot of episodes that are parents post-divorce and adult children of divorce talking about how they did it well, so that you can hear the stories of not just despair and ruin, but also people who have leaned in to protect their future. Today, I'm delighted to bring Rhonda Noordyk to the conversation. She is a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, the CDFA. She is also a financial coach, and she is dedicated to empowering women through their financial education with unwavering support and fierce advocacy. She is also the founder and CEO of Women's Financial Wellness Center and host of the podcast, Disrupting Divorce Conversations for Women. And this is just such a beautiful and remarkable statistic that I recently learned about Rhonda, that over the past 10 years, she has helped to move over $22 million into the hands of her clients. Thank you so much for joining us, Rhonda, and welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, Karen. I am looking forward to our conversation today.
I want to start, I always like to demystify some of the jargon for folks who are maybe just coming into what it is to get divorced. And a CDFA, they're going to hear those letters thrown around. Can you tell us specifically what a CDFA does and how that's different than like a financial advisor or an accountant or a tax lawyer?
Yeah, absolutely. So a Certified Divorce Financial Analyst is somebody who is dedicated and has specialized training in helping people navigate through the financial aspects of the divorce process. So we're doing things like looking at pensions, looking at tax ramifications, coming up with solutions, looking at income. So, I mean, really anything related to the financial aspect for the divorce is something that we can help with. There are times when we need specialists to dive a little bit deeper. So we may need a business valuation expert or a forensic accountant. So there are kind of variations of that depending on the complexity of the situation. But for me, I came out of the financial industry and really wanted to be able to help people navigate through divorce. I am not doing investments. I'm not selling insurance. I'm doing consulting specifically for people that are going through divorce and helping them come up with solutions and strategies, but also helping people understand what the proposals mean for them. It's a very practical approach to crunching the numbers and saying, okay, what does this look like? And I always say, the numbers in the calculations, the outputs are only as good as the numbers we're putting into them. So what numbers are we using for income? What numbers are we using for the valuations on property? There are ways that we can move the needle. And so I love being able to help people understand their options.
I'm going to grab another little piece of jargon that you threw out there. Forensic accountant. Who are they? What do they do? And when would we be needing such an expert?
Yeah, so it's interesting because forensic accountants, their job really is often to find lost, hidden, wasted money. So they'll go back and look at monies, right, to see if there's money that has changed accounts, that people have moved to other places, et cetera, et cetera. So they're looking for hidden, lost, wasted money. I think that one of the areas that often people say, oh yeah, you need a forensic accountant, but a lot of times people don't necessarily understand what that means. And I always tell people at the end of the day, the forensic accountant's role, in addition to being able to do those things, is what's the scope? What are we looking for? What's their job? Really dialing in the scope of their engagement being clear on the expectations, because a lot of times I just talked to a client, unfortunately, that had a not so good experience. And she came to me after she had already spent $18,000 on a forensic accountant with no deliverable, no report, the communication's been lacking. And so part of my job is going to be I'm going to hop on the phone with the forensic, ask some very specific questions, and then try to help work with the attorney to figure out where do we go from here, because it's challenging, right? And so a lot of times if the attorneys aren't sure what to be doing, they'll say you need a forensic accountant. And so then the forensic gets in there and they're doing tons of work, all of which to either come up with nothing or, again, there's a strategy that goes into it. So I want to make sure that people find the right forensic accountant, that we know the scope of what they're looking at, what they're doing, and then kind of managing that process for them as well.
Beautiful. I'm going to leap to, especially since you work primarily with women, and often women are carrying the burden of the domestic load of labor, raising the children, staying at home, maybe pausing their careers and then re-entering. Maybe they even come to the divorce at that time not working. Can you just address a little bit about that shift around employment, or that there might be often child support, but also spousal support, and what women maybe should be thinking about in terms of their own financial stability on the other side of divorce?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things that I most often see there is for people that have been out of the workforce for a period of time, sometimes it's, a couple of years, sometimes it's decades, that reentry can be really difficult. And I know you specialize in helping with transitions, and that's just another one we can add to the list, right? And so I think women in particular often find themselves really stuck. Do I go back to work? Do I not go back to work? Is it going to impact my support? Is it not? And what I would say there is I often will say, well, we got to get input from the attorney if you're working with an attorney. However, would you rather have monopoly money or would you rather have real dollars? Because if they are going to impute, which means basically on paper say that you could be making X, even though you're not working, it does impact the support calculation. And for me, I'm always looking at, what does that impact look like? And how can we move the needle? And so at the end of the day, I think women have to look at, where is my income going to be coming from? It's often a three-pronged, right? It's going to be potentially support, child support, and or alimony maintenance, depending on the situation. It could be income from investments. So if they have assets that they can be drawing an income off of, that could be another income source. And then the third one could be some kind of an employment, whether it's, they're starting a business, they're working part-time, full-time, whatever. But we really have to look at a multi-pronged approach to make sure that women can navigate through. And of course, that starts with looking at the expenses. What areas of expenses do you have? And a lot of times in a traditional divorce setting, they start to nickel and dime, like, well, you don't need this and you don't need this. And it's really judgmental as far as how women are spending their dollars. I prefer to take an approach that says, okay, what are your current expenses? What are your projected? What are the things that we need to plan for? I don't want you cutting back and living on rice and beans. Like, that's not the direction we're going to go. While there might need to be some adjustments to lifestyle, I do not subscribe to the fact that one party needs to be, so much better off at the end of it than the other party. And that's a narrative that they're telling themselves.
Yes. So working on the budget is one of the things that you would do with your client. And I'm here to tell you, folks, your lifestyle is going to change. When you go from a 2-income household to a single income household, it's going to look different. And for a time, I remember for myself, for about 3 years, really like cinching up the belt and that financial recovery that it takes to reestablish that stability for yourself on the other side of divorce. You used another fancy word, Rhonda, that comes up a lot with my clients, and I think people don't recognize it, and it's about to impute wages. So let's just explain a little bit more for those of you who maybe haven't been working, or the clever person who sees on the horizon. It's the period I call like you're packing your psychological parachute. You're going to leap out of this plane. So you're getting your ducks in a row, which might also be like, I'm going to move to part-time, or I'm going to just not work for a while. And that means I'm going to get a bigger settlement. And again, remember, you're negotiating in many cases with your co-parent. So we don't, at least in the good divorce world, we try not to weaponize divorce so that we want everyone to come out sound and stable. But for whatever reason, if you're not working at the time of the divorce, explain this process and how it gets calculated based on education, past work history, et cetera.
Yeah. So a lot of times what they'll do is they'll hire a vocational expert, which is somebody who will take a look at the history, the work history, the medical aspects, the educational level. And so then they do their research, they gather information, they do the research. They also look at what jobs are in the marketplace and start to kind of come up with an idea of what they think this person could make if they were to reenter the job market. And kind of along the point that you made, this, from my perspective, having taught in higher education, we had a department called workforce development. And the whole intention with that was to retool people to be able to reenter the job market. That was where these vocational assessments came in, which was very positive, right? I do feel like they have been used to weaponize because they say, well, we know that you haven't worked for 20 years, but this is what we think you could be making. And while maybe at some point they can get to that, it's not going to happen overnight. And so I had a client I was working with. She had, now this was close to 20 years ago. She had some educational background in design, web design. 20 years ago, it's like so not even relevant right now. And so they did their analysis, and the vocational expert came back and said, well, we think she could be making 80. And I'm like, in what world? Yeah. It's not happening. So they will end up using, try to use those numbers like, hey, we've got an expert. So that's the tricky part. I think for women, we need to really be thinking, and people in general, we need to be thinking, what is it that I want to do? What can I do to be able to, again, have multiple streams of income coming in from various sources so that I can continue to move forward, in the best way possible. And so there is most likely going to be some employment in part of their future moving forward, depending on their financial situation. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to go back to bedside nursing at 40 plus hours a week, nights and weekends. I mean, they're going to have some options, and, they can be working with somebody who's helping them navigate through their options, such as a career coach or something like that, right?
And so there's a mythology there that I think can happen. And again, nobody knows how to get divorced. We're not, until you're in the river of divorce, you probably are not thinking about it, researching it, talking about it much. So this idea of the underemployed, and I had a case where husband was a doctor, 3 children, all young adults in their 20s, kind of established, and wife really just thought, oh yeah, I'm going to divorce him and I'm going to get half of his salary for life. Like that was her plan. And as it turns out, that's not really how it works. One, he also has a budget. He also has to be able to keep a roof over his head. And he was the boomerang house, right? Those young adult kids were coming in and out of his home. And he has to have an opportunity to retire. He was already pushing 60 and career was shrinking. And he had been a physician for a long time and it completely supported the family. Mom had worked a little bit here and there. And they went right in and imputed, you have a degree in this and you can manage this amount of work at your age. And the conversation I had with her was about empowerment. Like, do you really want to continue to be supported by your former spouse? Do you not want to have the pride of your own paycheck to go back into the workforce and re-identify in a field that she really liked and she was really quite good at? And so, again, it wasn't just how are we going to divide these things, but also how are you going to reinvent yourself so that you get out of the drama of it, right? So there's not so many financial tethers to this person and that you are living independently. I don't know if you run into similar stories as that and what you would say to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I definitely think it's part of the reentry piece, the fear around, hey, I'm afraid, right? And so again, there's variations depending on what state people are in as far as the maintenance on how much and how long and what does that look like. And that's all part of the calculation that we can help navigate through. What does this mean for you? But I do agree, like I am so excited when people say, hey, I've always wanted to fill in the blank, or I've started a business, I really want to make a go of it. Or, I do very much agree that there's an opportunity for them to be empowered. And as part of the divorce process itself, there is an opportunity for women to lean in to really getting a good handle on the finances. Because as I'm working with them, I don't want them to just, I'm getting through suffering and getting through the process. And then we get to the end and they're like, okay, well, I really don't know. I've got this chunk of money or I've got support coming in, but I don't really know what it means for me. It's just not a good scenario. And so I use this opportunity to say, listen, we are going to help empower you, understand the pieces. So when this is over, you are in the best possible position to at least say, that's a good question. Let me find the answer, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to know all the things. We have to know who to ask or where to look. And I really want to build that muscle so that they can feel more confident, moving forward.
Well, we're going to dive in more after the break. We're chatting today with Rhonda Noordyk. She is the founder and CEO of Women's Financial Wellness Center. Rhonda, what's the quick way that people can find you in case they're dashing now and they're going to come back, but they want to tap into your resources?
Yeah, absolutely. My website, wfwcdivorce.com.
wfwcdivorce.com, standing for Women's Financial Wellness Center. Stay tuned, and we will be back with Rhonda Noordyk, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst.
Are you thinking about getting divorced? Before you call a lawyer, call the Good Divorce Coach, Karen McNenny, a certified divorce counselor, co-parenting specialist, and mediator. Karen's signature Good Divorce experience will guide you through your divorce journey, from the day you make that difficult decision to the day the decree is signed, all for a predictable fee. The Good Divorce Coach will teach you and your partner how to get divorced and be divorced with less conflict and less debt. Visit thegooddivorcecoach.com to get in touch with Karen.
Now, back to the show with Karen.
Hello and welcome back to the Good Divorce Show. I'm Karen McNenny, your good divorce coach, providing consulting services that will take you from beginning to end and help you protect your future, and partnering with experts like our expert Rhonda Noordyk, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst and founder of Women's Financial Wellness Center. I know that you have got so much knowledge in your head, more than we can talk about today, Rhonda. But where else can people find you and the resources that you have available right now that people could tap into if they're not working directly with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So on our website, wfwcdivorce.com, there is a tab called Resources. And there's all kinds of things on there that people can take a listen, watch, download. So we do have a mini course called 6 Proven Steps to Advocate for a Fair Divorce Financial Settlement. We have our National Resource Directory. We have my podcast, Disrupting Divorce, and then also blog articles and my book, Bold Beginning. So lots of free or inexpensive ways for people to just start getting some information, as they're kind of navigating through this process.
And Bold Beginnings is kind of hot off the press. We're chatting in early 2025. Can you give us a little overview of what people would find in that book?
Yeah, so this book was designed intentionally to be something that you could put in your purse, throw in the car, work while you're waiting in line to pick up the kids from school or at a doctor's appointment. But I took the word confidence and I created, using that acronym, very practical things that people can do, right? And so each chapter has a topic and then explanation of a concept and then the application. And again, it's intended to be a shorter read. It's about 80 pages. But again, that was intentional because a lot of the people that I'm working with are so overwhelmed that I really wanted to make it applicable and easy for them to digest and get some movement, get some wins along the way.
And the acronym is confidence.
Yes.
And I put you on the hot seat, Rhonda. Pick out one letter in there and tell us what it stands for and what we might find as a tool inside that chapter.
Yes. So numbers are your BFF. That's the N. And I talk a little bit in there about something that I learned very early on when I was in the financial industry, which was the rule of 72. And this concept was started by Albert Einstein. It's been around forever. But basically what you do is you take the interest that you'd be receiving on an account and you divide that by a standard number, which is 72. And the resulting number basically tells you how long it would take for that money to double. So in my book, I share a little bit about my grandma was wanting to gift me some money. And she said, "Oh, Rhonda, you should go down and talk to Ira at the bank." And I was like, "Who's Ira?" Because it sounded like it was a person.
Now tell our listeners who Ira is, because again, you suffer the curse of knowledge, smarty pants. You are. Some people are hearing these things for the first time.
Right.
Yeah. Unpack the whole real story.
Yes. It's the individual retirement account. So she was thinking, hey, you should be investing this money for retirement or whatever. So I end up doing the rule of 72 and I was like, yeah, so that is going to double in 36 years. So then you make a different decision with that money, right? I mean, as a young adult, you're like, do I really want to wait 36 years for the money that she gave me to double? I don't think so. But I love the concept. And we can also use it on the flip side when we're talking about debt. So if somebody has credit card debt and they're like, oh, my interest rate's, 25 and we do, 74 divided by 25, we realize every 3 years that money, right, that is going to be doubling in the opposite direction. And so it was just a really simple tool that I love for just, again, becoming BFFs with the numbers. And I think it's important to say, I've not always been, the numbers have not always been my friend. I mean, as a kid, I loved saving. I definitely felt, and I share a little bit in my book about my history with money. And it was I did not have a good relationship with it. And primarily a lot of that was because my grandparents were really successful business owners and they were big savers. But then it skipped a generation and my parents were not so good. With my dad, it was in the 80s. My dad would use our house as an ATM. He'd make a bad decision. They'd refinance the house, pay off the debt. And that cycle continued until we got into the mid 90s, early 2000s. You couldn't do that anymore. Stuff started to shift and change. And I started in the financial industry really because I said, I want to be able to help people better understand money. I want to improve my own personal relationship with money. I was surrounded by very successful people who had figured it out. And I was like, how do they do that? I want to have assets and be able to invest in causes and people that are really important to me. And so that's really how that whole journey started. And I just surrounded myself with really smart people. And I realized, what, just because people have more money doesn't mean that they're going to be bad human beings. I truly got to see the more money that people have, it just actually amplifies who they already are. Good human being with a small amount, they're going to be a bad human being with a lot.
So tell us where the fork in the road and you really started to double down and support women going through divorce. And I know I get the question, why do you want to hang out with people going through divorce all the time? That sounds really hard and really depressing.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So when I started in the financial industry in the early 2000s, I loved helping people. But I also really found myself gravitating toward wanting to help women because there was such a deficit in education. And we saw very early on, there was a study done by Prudential in the early 2000s, and it basically said that there was a big gap in confidence for women, primarily because it wasn't because we weren't smart enough. It was simply because we didn't have the experience or the knowledge. So the formula for confidence really is the knowledge plus the experience. And if we have the knowledge, Without the experience, it's theory. If we have the experience without the knowledge, it's trial and error. But when we get the two things working together, we can not only grow our confidence, but in my opinion, we can accelerate it. So what's really nice about, this whole process is, how can I help women? So we started doing events, and this was, again, early 2000s. I built my business from event to event. We would do live events, and I'm kind of evented out. So I'm so glad that things have shifted. I know people are starting to do more events. I'm okay not doing them. Because I did so many of them, but we would have standing room only, and we would be educating, empowering women. But here's what would happen. They would say, "This is really amazing, Rhonda. I learned so much." And then they would go home and their spouse would say, "Oh, don't worry. We've got a guy. You don't need to know. You'll be taken care of," and all of that. And I found myself getting really frustrated. Like, oh my gosh, like you can be empowered. You don't have to have somebody else be in charge. And so, a long story short, in 2014, I found myself in my office I was a partner at a financial firm. And I was like, what do I want my business to look like 5 years from now? And the reality of it wasn't more assets, more clients, more revenue. It was, I really want to be able to double down in helping people go through the divorce process. Mm-hmm. And so I remember having a conversation. Somebody walked into my office and they're like, "Rhonda, here, you need to talk to these people." I'm like, "Well, who are these people?" And it was an organization that was looking for entrepreneurs who wanted to grow and scale their businesses. And I was able to take advantage of that program because they got there was corporate dollars. And so I got to spend the summer really getting clear on what I wanted. And as we mapped it out, the gentleman who was heading up the conversation and the training, super smart, probably one of the most brilliant business people I have ever met, said, "Rhonda, I think if you really want to go all in on this, you're going to have to leave your financial career in that traditional sense and go over here." And I was like, I'm not hearing this. Like, I worked too hard for these licenses. I've been in this male-dominated industry. I'm finally making my voice and standing up for myself. But I decided to leave because I think at the end of the day, I knew that I couldn't continue the same, build my business the way I wanted to build my business by staying in the financial industry. So I left in 2014 and leased my own office and started again hosting events and building this reputation. But I always knew I wanted to reach people from all over the country. I just didn't know how to do it. And I thought, well, there's plenty of divorces in Wisconsin where I'm based to be able to do this. And then launched my podcast and a series of other things. But when I started, there weren't divorce coaches. I mean, I know the certification was around, but nobody had heard of them. Nobody had heard of CDFAs. You just went to the attorney and that was it. And so I was very much, a thought leader in that space. And yeah, I crossed that 5-year mark and I looked back and I was like, this has actually not only met my expectations, it's exceeded it, and have worked really hard to build a reputation across the country to really be able to say, listen, I don't want ill will for men. I really don't. But I don't want my women clients to be taken advantage of. And so I want to be able to be that voice and be in the gaps and help them understand what's being proposed so that they can make good decisions. And yeah, so that's,
and I think you're identifying,
it's
a gap of knowledge, right? We've
absolutely,
we've inherited a time when it was primarily men in the workforce. And so primarily men managing the money. Certainly my parents, they're in their 80s. It has not changed. And finally, when I was young, the caboose of 5 kids, my mom's like, I'm going to go back to work because I want to be able to have some power and control and decision making. And I really appreciate you saying it's not the future is female and down with men. The future's together. So all we're trying to do is close that gap so that women can play on the same playground as the fellas, right? We've got education now. We've got knowledge and investment. And I'm so glad you also just brought up the reminder that there is a group of pioneers like you and I who are disrupting the divorce industrial complex. And again, we're not anti-lawyers, but the role of lawyers has gotten so supersized in divorce, and that most of us, we just, that's the only tool available. Go get a lawyer and get a shark and lawyer up and move into a battle. And I don't think most people start that way. but they get sucked into that world. And lawyers are really good at doing what they're trained to do, which is to fight for their client. And sometimes that's what you need, but not always. And so the idea of divorce consultants and CDFAs and coaches, it is a rising tide in this movement here as we enter into 2025. There are a lot of disruptors shaking things down.
Yeah.
I wanted to circle back to this idea of where the gap in generation and where women weren't getting educated. And I know certainly I take financial literacy really seriously in my household as I raise my children. And you are an undivorced woman with 3 daughters in your home. What is the financial literacy that you're providing to them as they begin their relationship with money? Because honestly, there's a lot of women who are just beginning their relationship with money.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so I think there's a couple things. I mean, one is, first of all, let's just be honest. Okay. We would like to think that our kids listen to us because we know what we're doing. Okay. They don't. My husband's still in the financial, and he's a financial expert. I'm over here doing my thing. I don't know. Like, there's no secret answer to that. But I would say we take it situation by situation, right? Looking for micro moments that we can share with our teenage daughters about money. And what they do know is, while mom and dad work really hard, they're super passionate and they are very giving. That has been the role modeling around our household. So we've got a rule, right? Anytime we have kids in the car and we're going somewhere, you're not paying. Like, that's, like, it's our treat. And so I think we've had an opportunity to be able to lead by example and really having a giving heart and caring for people. On the logistical side, it's been like any parent, right? You take these moments. So like whether it's financial aid for school, loans for school, if they're qualifying for that, and taking those moments to explain them as that stuff comes up is something that we've been doing. Do I feel like my kids are leaps and bounds ahead because of our knowledge? I don't. I think part of it is each of my kids is different. So how they approach money is different. My middle daughter is super all about, she's a good saver. She's also got a giving heart, but she also is looking for a deal. My oldest, I'm like, you need, she's all about the name brand stuff, so again, it's like, and my middle daughter, she is a pretty good saver too. So it just kind of depends. It's looking at each of their individual personalities and then meeting them where they're at and having the conversations as situations come up. Because really, I mean, at the end of the day, right, they've only had their jobs, right? They have their little jobs or whatever since they were 14 or 15. So it's just been a small window where they've had an opportunity to have a bank account, have a savings account. My oldest doesn't have a credit card, but it's something we've talked about for her to be able to build credit. Like, okay, what does that look like?
Right.
And would you be interested in it? Now you're getting these credit card offers. And if you were to do a credit card, which one would you want? But it's really important that you pay it off. So again, just using those micro moments to be able to help teach them. But it's not like, hey, let me sit down and I'll give you the PowerPoint version of it's just, that's not how
it's where the teachable moments. And just like on the credit card front, I know there are listeners who maybe the more moneyed partner, all the credit cards have been on their name, and you are trying to go out and build credit, and there might be bad credit that you're attached to. So untangling those things and really establishing your own credit score might be a task. And also this budgeting, because I do think with our young children, this is the money coming in, this is going out. You cannot actually go out to lunch every day. You cannot do that. You can't always shop at the mall. Let's get your thrifter out. So same thing as we move into those single income households and budgeting. Are there budgeting apps that you recommend, or do you find them useful? How do you, let's go as we near the end of our conversation today into some really practical, how can I make sure I'm managing my day-to-day money and budget when my income has just shrunk maybe by.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So there's a couple things. One is there are some apps. One of the ones I used to recommend for quite a long time was Mint. Mint is no longer, so I had to kind of do some research and find some other ones, and there's some good ones. One of the ones that I really like is called Monarch Money. I like
Can you
Monarch.
say that again?
It's called Monarch Money.
Monarch, Monarch, like the butterfly, Monarch Money.
And I like it because visually it's easy to read. Like, I think just having the dashboard, having the ability to connect bank accounts to it, getting real-time feeds on where things are at certainly can be helpful. So that's the one that I have been recommending.
Great.
It's not the end all be all. It's not the only one out there. I would say though that you have to be able to do one that you're excited about, because a lot of those there is some front end work that needs to be done to get it set up. But once you do, then it's more on the maintenance side.
If it doesn't suit you, you're not going to use it. So you want to find something you're going to use. And it might be, again, thinking of our grandmothers, a series of envelopes with cash in it.
That's right.
One's labeled out to lunch and utilities and going to the movies. And when the bucket's empty, it's empty until it gets refilled the next month. Living in a cash world just sounds insane in 2025 because that's not our world. So tracking it even in the digital world is so valuable.
And there are some apps that have digital wallets, so you could set up the various categories within that space if you want to do that. I think you just, to your point, right, you just have to find a system that's going to work for you. But as part of the divorce process, it is getting a look at what are your current expenses, what are the things that you really, and again, I think there's ways for you to be able to plan for those things. When I'm helping my clients with the budgeting piece, I'm not saying we're cutting out eating out, we're cutting out, getting your hair, whatever. Like, we're not cutting all that stuff out. We're trying to figure out, okay, there might be some areas that need to be set aside or whatever, but it doesn't mean that you have to slash everything. I think the other thing that people often do or maybe have done is they put everything on their credit card and then they pay it off. And that's fine, except for the tricky part with that is it's hard to determine the categories. So it's a lot of times those credit cards are not categorizing your expenditures. Right. And so it makes it a little bit difficult. The other thing I would say is don't feel like you have to go back and recreate the wheel. I think I was meeting with a client the other day and she's like, well, maybe if I go back and look at 5 years worth of previous spending, I'm like, why? Like, let's start fresh. Let's get a fresh perspective on what you're going to have coming in, what your needs are now, so that you can best plan. And there's an aspect of that visionary component to it too. Like, okay, well, where do you want to live? Because I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I'm going to be in an efficiency apartment in a bad neighborhood. And I'm like, well, really? No, right. So again, it's just getting the data to be able to make those good decisions and realize, oh, I can actually have a reasonable place. It's in a nice neighborhood. It's safe. I've got plenty of space, lots of light, whatever it is, right? So it's, not necessarily just making those decisions before we've crunched the numbers,
right,
on knowing what that's going to look like.
That future catastrophizing. I see it a lot with my clients. They're just off the deep end. And most I say, we don't know. We just don't know yet. So before you're eating rice and beans in your 1-bedroom basement apartment, just take a deep breath. We're going to work through it. We're going to guide you through the process, just like a river guide. And we can only read the river as it comes. So stay in the boat. We'll get you here.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Rhonda Noordyk of Women's Financial Wellness Center, it is clear that you would be a welcome guide on any river, and reminding people, although you're based in Wisconsin, it's my understanding you can work with clients across the country. Yeah. Remind folks again where to find you and your resources.
Yeah, absolutely. www.cdivorce.com. Go to the resource tab and you will have a lot of options that you can select from.
Yes, thank you so much for spending your time with my audience today, Rhonda. And thanks to all of you again for investing in yourselves to become educated and more confident in your journey towards a good divorce. And remember, everything will be okay in the end. And if it's not okay, it's not the end.
Thanks for listening. Do you have questions or thoughts about this week's episode? Let us know by following the Good Divorce Coach on Facebook and Instagram at Good Divorce Coach, and leave a comment. And be sure to tune in every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific or listen anytime wherever you get your podcasts.